Okay, so welcome everybody. So, Frederick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fabrice. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Frédéric Grand. I'm the CEO of MSH. So I'm really pleased to be here to present to you the result of the third survey that we run on international mobility. And it's a survey that reveals some surprises and good surprises. I hope you'll see that. Well, first of all, thank you all for attending. I see that you are a bit more than 50. I believe we had many more that subscribed, so we may have more joining in the course of the presentation. Maybe before we start, let me introduce some of the gentlemen that you may see on the screen. First of all, to join me in presenting the survey will be Meriadec Bléjean. Meriadec works for OpinionWay. OpinionWay is the company that ran the surveys and conducted the interviews with companies. So, and Meriadec, you are the Deputy CEO of OpinionWay. So good morning, Meriadec, and it's an honor to have you, and thank you for being there. We also have Laurent Jumel. Laurent recently joined MSH. So welcome again, a warm welcome again to you, Laurent. Laurent is the Deputy CEO of MSH, and he runs sales and the marketing for MSH. And last but not least, Fabrice Tuffigo is there. Fabrice will be playing Monsieur Loyal. He will be taking your question on the chat and asking them to us when we do the presentation. I don't know, Fabrice, if you want to say a word on the technical aspect of the webinar.
Yep, thank you very much, Fred, and hello to everyone. As mentioned by Fred, you will have the opportunity to ask all your questions using the chat that is at the bottom right of your screen. For sure, the webinar will be recorded and you will soon receive an follow-up email with access to the replay. And last but not least, if you can take a few minutes at the very end of the webinar to answer the survey that will appear on your screen, it will be more than appreciated. Thank you very much and have a nice webinar.
Thank you, Fabrice. So on the agenda today, what we have, Meriadec will start and present how the survey was conducted and the first round of results. Then Laurent and I will take over and we'll go through the second set of results. And then we will have a Q&A session before I do the conclusion. But please, if you have questions during the presentation, do not wait for the Q&A session and ask your questions. And Fabrice will stop us and ask the question so we can make it as interactive as possible. Maybe before handing it over to Meriadec, maybe let me say words on MSH. I believe most of you know us already, but just in case. So MSH, we're part of a larger group called GeoCSC. Within the group, we do the international mobility. Actually, we are a lead players on the international mobility scene, and we act as broker or as TPA or both, meaning we help companies, international organization, individuals when they go overseas. We would be working with HR for corporate, for international organization, or individuals directly to support them in their strategy when they go overseas. We help them find the best insurance solution for health and disability and assistance, of course. And then we would be managing their claims expenses or their claims, the health expenses or their health claims. And what's critical to them is for the 500,000 members we serve across the world is to give them access to our medical network, meaning it's something that is accessible, where they may have direct billing facilities, where they have good quality of health treatment at price we negotiated. So this is what we do. Of course, if you have questions, please do not hesitate to ask some of our guys and be in contact with them. With no further ado, maybe Meriadec, I leave it to you to introduce the survey. Thanks.
Well, with great pleasure. Hello to everyone. So we'll just start with the context of the survey. If we can pass the first slide, please. And the second then. So MSH has started monitoring the impact of the pandemic in 2020 and has continued this barometer for the 2 following years. And one can say that in the past 3 years, well, it has been very rich in very strong changes throughout the world, with, of course, the pandemic, and today other very high challenges for companies. And this is why this barometer is so exciting, because we can see the differences in terms of international mobility policies, which has been going through the past years. And so this survey is carried out among very large companies. So we really have a focus on what is happening today on international mobility policies. And I think it's a unique tool in order to monitor this. The first wave was conducted in September 2020, so 6 months after the big boom of the pandemic. And a second wave was conducted in March 2021. And in March 2021, we saw quite a few very interesting highlights and key findings. Because despite of the pandemic, we've seen that a majority of companies had maintained international mobilities, so that was quite encouraging on this aspect. But in order to maintain this international mobility, action had to be taken by the RH and by strengthening strongly corporate social responsibilities, and also actions had to be taken, including medical evacuation benefits and special emergency plans. So we did see a very, very strong impact, of course, as you all know, a year after the beginning of the pandemic. And this last wave has been conducted in September 2022. So 1 year and 6 months after this last measure. So we are now going to see a year and a half after this measure, how are things today? So we'll go to the next slide, please. And the aim of the survey is, of course, still the same, to measure the impact of geopolitical, ecological, socio-economic and pandemic challenges on international mobility policies, and to collect this among a large panel of very, very large companies who do have a very large number of employees who are working abroad. So we'll go to the next slide. So just to come back a bit more in detail about the insights we gathered in 2021. So as I said, despite a strong pandemic, we had a majority of companies who kept or increased the number of globally mobile employees. So that was quite a strong finding. So of course there was a third who decreased, but the majority kept people abroad. So that was quite encouraging. Even so, in order to maintain or increase this mobility, there was a real need to reinforce the CSR policy for a majority of companies, and also strong attention had to be put on medical evacuation benefits and emergency plans in order to reinsure the employees. And so that was really the findings, with, of course, a top priority about concerns about the pandemic. So let's see how it's evaluated today. So we'll go to the next slide just to present you the methodology of this last wave. And as I said, it was conducted in September, during all the months of September. So these results are very fresh, just out of the box. So it's interesting to have a real measurement, which is very recent, which includes, of course, the war in Ukraine at the present time, the energy crisis. So we are gathering insights with all this context brought together. We have quite a large number of respondents, 78 all in all, approximately 80 people among very, very large companies, and of course among people who are responsible of international mobility policies. And these interviews were made by phone and by our international researchers. So let's deepen into the results and see the details of the results of this first wave. So let's go on the presentation, please, in the next slide. Just to have an overlook of the profile of the sample we have interviewed, which is very, very close to the precedent wave. So we can actually compare the results because we are on a sample which structure is very comparable to the wave we carried out in 2021 with many clients of MSH and a few prospects also, and quite a large number of companies who have more than 50 employees abroad, 45%. So it was approximately the same numbers in 2021. So as you can see, we have very large companies in this bracket. And in terms of sector of activity, we are also very stable compared to 2021, with the majority of companies coming from the manufacturing sector, services also, consumer goods, engineering and construction for the main branches. And 50% of the respondents had already responded to the survey in 2021, which makes it also very interesting to follow on the same corpus of sample how policies are moving today. So we'll go again on the next slide, please. And start with the results. And starting with the positive results in terms of international mobility policies, and also positive context about how companies are facing the future in terms of turnover and in terms of dynamics. So let's go to the next slide, and we can see that this year compared to 2021, companies are in much more positive configuration with large dynamic in terms of turnover on the activity and turnover of the company, which is increasing strongly compared to March 2021. It's the highest increase. We had more 15 points of increase among companies in terms of activity and turnover. So increase or stable is very wide, 86%, which is very encouraging for companies and their development. In terms of staff number and number of employees also, we have a stronger increase this year compared to March 2021, with 88% overall who are either increasing the number of companies or having a stable number of companies. And globally, in terms of the sector in which the companies are, we are also in a positive dynamic. So basically, companies are much more in a positive trend today compared to March 2021, despite the international context, which is quite preoccupying for quite a lot of companies. So in this respect, how is international mobility evaluating today? If we go to the next slide. And here again, the trend is very positive. And of course, as you are all in the HR environment. I'm sure you are very conscious about this, but it's interesting to see the strong differences compared to March 2021, where we had only 3% of the companies who were increasing their total population of globally mobile employees. So it was mainly stable, but the percentage of increase was very low. This year we gained 25 points, and 28% of companies are actually increasing their total population of globally mobile employees. We'll see that the conditions are changing a bit in terms of duration, for example. We'll see that just afterwards. But the trend is very positive, with 2/3 of the company who are globally increasing their population. We can go to the next slide. And where are they based? Where are they based? Well, they are based in several companies, because we are in several countries, sorry, because we are in very large companies who have subsidiaries in many continents. And we can see that we are increasing the number of people mobily in international mobility who are based in Europe with plus 11 points and with strong representation, of globally mobile employees in Asia, Africa, North America, and South America, and the Middle East. What's interesting to see is that among large companies who have over 150 expatriate employees, they are widespread on all continents, and with in average staff which are in 5 different continents at the same time. Can go to the next slide, please. So in terms of duration of assignments, we are quite stable all in all compared to 2021, with 83% have kept their employees' international assignments at the same level. Very stable actually compared to 2021. 12% minority have shortened the duration, and 5% have extended. So we have a stability on this duration, but we will see that policies are different in terms of bringing them back more often. But we'll see that just afterwards. If we can go to the next slide, please.
Well, thank you, Meriadec. I don't know if there are questions for you, Fabrice. No?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, thanks. That's very good news, actually, to see companies looking at the future with growth perspective and increasing number of people they will send after the years we've been through. So thanks for that. So let's move now to the challenges as seen by the company we surveyed, and what is the impact on the international mobility. And then we will discuss the new forms of mobility that we can start to see as per the responding people. So if we move maybe to the next slide, please. What we've done is we've asked HR executive to rank the challenges that they are confronted with. And we asked them to rank it from the highest, which is here on the top of the screen. So the one that they believe they will have has the highest significance for them, to the lowest, which is here at the bottom. As a reminder, last year we had the same thing. And the challenge number 1 in 2021 was the pandemic. And as Meriadec said, the survey was run in March 2021, and that was the worry number 1 by far for a lot of companies. That was the pandemic crisis. It's really interesting to note first that it moved down. I would even say it slipped to the 5th place this year. So when we interviewed company, pandemic is number 5. The number 1 challenge of 2022, and again, it was in September, I think we had the survey from HR executive, is keeping the staff on board and acquiring new talent. So it's really, the so-called talent war that is what is keeping HR executive awake at night. The second challenge, ranked by a level of significance, is it touches on adjusting to the way we work and the new relationship of employees at work. We are on the work from home topic. We are on the post-COVID situation where a lot of companies are trying to engage staff and seeing staff change or to re-engage staff post-COVID. What is really interesting to me to note is if you think of the first two challenges I just mentioned, attracting talent, keeping current staff, and how to re-engage with people, these are purely HR driven. Mariadec has mentioned, and we'll see that later on, that the environment is a difficult one we're operating in, but the first two challenge is really about HR and talent and how we work with them and the new relationship at work. So for me, it was a really interesting learning. Moving to the number 3 challenge, it's all the uncertainty around the economic situation. We all know that there is an inflation going on, even though France is slightly protected than others, but in many countries, we have even double-digit inflation now these days. We have interest rates that are rising. I don't know how far they will go, but we've been living in a zero interest rate for decades, and now it's moving quite rapidly, and we even talking about the economic downturn. That's maybe ahead of us. So it's really tough to predict the future, and this uncertainty that is haunting us is ranked number 3 for the companies.
Hello to everyone. Maybe we can mitigate this figure of 51% with uncertainty for global major companies. Because in fact, 61% of the MNCs state the issue of economic uncertainty as impactful as the challenge in recruitment for their international mobility policy.
Thank you for to see that differences. The challenge number 4 that you see on the screen is less energy consumption and what I would call the ecological transition. We all know that we have to change as individuals, as businesses, to become less carbon intense and to give a better world to the next generation if we can. It's important, and you see that as number 4. I mentioned the number 5. It's really the pandemic, and it was number 1 as a reminder last year. And 5th and 7th are the rising prices of energy that are of concern. And you've seen in Mariadec presentation, there were a lot of manufacturing companies in the sample, so we can understand that it is impactful. And the last one, which came a bit as a surprise, I would have put it a higher number, but maybe as an individual versus as a business. That's the war in Ukraine and all the collateral with that. So that is the challenge. If we move now to the next slide to see how significant are these challenges for the HR executive we interviewed. And again, for me, it was a bit of a surprise, is only 38% of the surveyed company mentioned that this will be impacting their international mobility policies, meaning that actually almost 2/3 says, no, it's not impacting my international mobility policies. And you've seen that there are people now thinking of growing people that will be internationally mobile. So for me, when I saw that and I reflected on it, it speaks miles about how companies these days are becoming resilient. We've been through several crises. We had the pandemic, and I think the company have been weathering that, and we've seen doing okay, more or less. And I believe that now this company are used to all these uncertainties and challenges, and just going through that with a lot of resilience.
But once again, we can see a slight difference for biggest companies that consider that these main issues could impact a little bit more their international mobility policy, 45% for big companies against 38% for all the companies.
Okay, thank you. And so overall 38%, 45 for the largest one. And then we ask them when you will see this impact, which you have on the next slide. And interesting enough, if we move to the next slide, please. 52% said, well, I have seen it already. So it's behind me. So only 50 or 48% to be precise says it's ahead of me. 10% are saying, well, I will have it before the end of this year. And then you see 28% says I will sense it during the first semester of 2023. And another 10% said that it will be impacting me in the second semesters of 2023. So once again, my feeling is now companies have their roadmap, they've decided on their policy and their international mobility policies, and they are just implementing and rolling them out. Maybe Laurent, if you can take the next one on a new form of international mobility that was for the challenges confronting companies.
Sure, Frederic. Next slide, please. Well, you are already familiar, I think, with these new forms of international mobility as commuting, as rotational mobility, or shorter trips. What is interesting is making the comparison with the results of the last year's survey. We can in fact underline two trends. First, it appears that commuting should increase quite significantly. Our assumption is that the flexibility given by remote working allows commuters to spend fewer days from home and family. We can emphasize the fact that the development of shorter but more frequent trips will occur in the future. Once again, mainly thanks to remote working. Bottom line, we can assume that remote working will boost overall international mobility. Stepping back a little bit and considering long-term trends. After the, let's say, golden age of international mobility with full package and trailing spouse, after maybe a more difficult period of tight corporate budget and tight package with context of dual career difficulties, we could anticipate a new increase in international mobilities boosted by remote working possibilities, helping to solve, for instance, the issue of trailing spouse career.
Thank you. So on the next slide, we will stay on the same topic, but changing, oops, yes, that's this one. So we're moving on slightly different ground now. The question was basically, do you accept to have employees working from overseas? So it's not you as an employer decided that you want to send someone elsewhere. And as Laurent stressed, it could be on a commuting, on a rotational mobility or a traditional one. The thing is, do you accept to have people working remotely from a different territory than where they should be based? And to that question, and it's for me again a surprise, 2/3, 63%, so almost 2 companies out of 3 said, yes, guys, we have it already. So 2 out of 3 of the companies we interviewed said we have people that are working remotely for overseas internationally on our staff. And what you see on the right side, when we say, how did you decide it? Most of them precisely 84% of them said it's been a decision that has been done case by case. So there's no set of rules. We just look at every situation and whether we wanted to keep the talent, and we make the decision one by one. Now, if I say it vice versa, that means that 16% of the company framed it a bit. And maybe frame it means, if you see 8% of them says there's no frame, but, we can say, well, as a rule, there's no rule. But 16% of the company have already accepted one way or the other without making it a case-by-case situation. So if you take 16% of 63 company, if you follow me, it's 10%. So already one company out of 10 has developed some sort of policy by which people can work from overseas, as requested by the employee. So I found that very interesting to see how that is moving. And if we move to the next slide, when we ask them, and do you see that growing? Will that form of people working from elsewhere grow? 48% of them said yes, this is going to grow. Or we reflected on that, and our reading is during COVID, companies had employees working from abroad, from overseas. It could have been different situation. We had employees that got stuck, in a country and that could not leave the country or join, where they were supposed to be based. And therefore, we had to accept, it was forced for them to work remotely from an international country, from a different country. We also had, and within MSH, we have 60 different nationalities out of the 1,200 employees we have. So you may have people saying, well, look, I'm Italian because we work full-time remote. Let me go back to my country so I be closer to, my parents maybe, or my cousin. And so we had people that decided to go back to their home country because it was, during pandemic, a full remote working situation for some of them. Also, and I experience it in peers and clients, some employees, some quietly, some with telling the employers, decided to go in a nicer place and say, well, because I'm working remotely 100%, instead of saying in Paris or another city, well, let's go to a nicer place, usually near the sea, in a nice island or something like that. And they enjoyed it. Now we are post-COVID. We are back to the office, but we have still a lot of work from home situation. And employees that liked and enjoyed this situation are requesting it now. And because, and I mentioned it, there is a war of talent and there is a concern for companies on how do I keep my staff and attract new staff. We see that this is becoming something that will be growing as a response for companies to make sure they are able to keep their talent and attract new one with this new sort of policies. And within MSH, actually, we do see clients moving into that direction. Laurent, if you want to add something, maybe. You're on mute.
Thank you, Fred. Yes, this does not come without challenges, be it for taxation issues, be it for health insurance for the employee and its families, as well as for death, disability, or work accident. Even if it is for 2-3 weeks or 1 month, do you have the right coverage in place? Can you offer good access to health network without creating an increase in your cost? When you are offering possibility to work abroad, you engage your responsibility and duty of care. So without stopping it, you need your international remote solution to be well thought. And we see more and more demands for this in MSH. And of course, we are ready to assist. We are actually developing solutions for working from abroad, be it for 3 to 6 weeks or more biggest period.
Thank you. So very interesting to see that new trend and how it goes. And And again, we have clients that are asking and presenting what they do. Sometimes it a bit escape the HR, but you need to be on top of it, and that's a way of keeping clients. And there are big companies, not the startup, doing that as well. So I think this is the result of this third survey, which I hope you enjoyed, and with all the learning and, as I mentioned, the good surprises, we are quite good in terms of timing, and I believe we're moving to the Q&A session. And maybe Fabrice, if you receive question, I'll let you, shoot. You're on mute.
Yes, thank you, Fred. So first question, during the COVID period, we heard a lot about telemedicine. What about the specific development of psychological teleconsultation, especially with the development of new form of mobility, such as international remote work?
Thank you. Actually, it's a good question, and one that will allow us to mention a point that this balance, the work-life balance, and the mental health situation. So, as you mentioned, we've been offering telemedicine as a service to the members, and this has grown a lot, of course, during COVID. It's been very useful, but we've also been offering remote psy, so you can have a consultation with a psy, and you take it remotely. And we've also give the ability as a service to call up psy, and we have the 24/7 service, so where you can call and speak without having to take a formal appointment. As I mentioned, if we have quite a rise in telemedicine, it's not as big as the increases we've seen in the taking an appointment with a psy. And I think there, and I'm talking maybe under your control, Xavier or Fabrice, but we're talking 140% increase from last year. And if I take 2 years, I think we have 280% increase in number of appointment and consultation. And if I move now to I'm calling up psy and I'm not taking an appointment, I'm just using the 24/7 service that's being offered, it's 1,000% increase over 1 year and a 2,000% increase over 2 years. So I know the base was maybe small, but again, if you compare to telemedicine, it's much higher. That probably means that there is a bit of a situation, and for every HR listening to this presentation, it's very important. You may have people that are either isolated, you may have people that are either experiencing some difficulties that are reaching out to us to use that service, but that increase speaks to the fact that we need to be cautious and aware that we may have difficult situation. Some may have come from, the lockdown. It was very tough on them in some countries. We had even some difficult situation with people being, badly ill, for instance. So I know that it has had an impact on people. But as I mentioned, the number 2 challenge for HR is adjusting to the new way of working. I think that's also very true to the staff sometimes, and even the what we call proximity manager, the first rank of management. And for them, it's been hard, it's been stressful, and we see more and more of the service that like P being used. So we need to be aware and work on that as companies. We have this responsibility.
Many thanks for your answers. So now 2 questions that are pretty close. So in your opinion, can the development of new forms of mobility, such as international teleworking, for example, or commuting, raise new issues? And another question that is very close, what, if any, what are the tax implications for salaries, etc., when it comes to global mobility?
Well, I don't know if you want me to start, Laurent, maybe, and then you take it over, or Xavier. Yes, when you send someone, well, first in the new forms, there were two questions. In the new form of mobility, this is raising new issues. There will be a taxation for the companies. And in one of the slides, you've seen some 4% of the companies that frame it said it's allowed to work from overseas, but if it's a place where I have a subsidiary. There is a reason behind that is if you send someone for too long, and it depends country by country, in a country, you take the risk of the local fiscal tax authorities saying that you've created a branch. I don't know, in French we say établissement permanent. And therefore, I will be taxing you as a corporate. So some companies are escaping that by saying you can only work in a place where I have already have subsidiaries, so I'm avoiding that situation. But you also have to be cautious of, in some countries, you may have to have a work permit, you may have to have a local health tax to be paid. So it's for everyone, every country, it's kind of a case-by-case analysis.
Okay.
Laurent, maybe if you want to add something, even though I think you recently came back from overseas, so you may have your own experience as well.
Yes, sure, Fred. This is a company tax point of view, but you have also the employee tax point of view. Even if you go abroad for a few months, you may be locally taxed, and then you can pay the tax on your home country, you can pay the tax on your host country, and then you have to seek what is eventually the bilateral agreement between home country and host country to avoid double taxation. So it's quite complex, and it depends on every couple of home and host country. You have also rules that implies, for instance, in Brazil, that if you are not a local fiscal resident, you can have mandate. So this is another complexity, and each case must be studied with a lot of cautious.
And I think that's an important point. And we are between a rock and a hard place sometimes, because this new form of mobility is, no doubt, they will continue. And you've seen, and you see that on the slide. And companies, as I mentioned, there's a war of talent, and companies will develop something one way or the other. So on one side, it's a trend and it will happen. That's my belief. On the other one, we're telling you, wow, be cautious. There are countries where you need work contract. Now, by the way, there are countries like Portugal, Barbados, Costa Rica that give digital nomad people work contract easily. But so be aware of, the situation vis-a-vis the work contract. Be aware of the situation vis-a-vis your own tax as a corporate, vis-a-vis disability. If the person is bringing his or her family in a nice country, but he fell in the stairs and he has a work accident. What is the compensation? Is your disability program out of France or another country working? So on one side, it's moving and it's moving fast. On the other side, we're telling you guys, be aware and really look at the situation, not to find yourself in a difficult place. And we're working actually as we speak with the association Préventaire, and we're having work streams on the new offering and services to make sure we have an answer. But the answer as of today is look at the country where the people will be, look at what you have, look at your contract. If you use your business travel policy, be aware that the limits are rather low, or be aware that sometimes the carrier says it was not something that was needed urgently. It could have been done in the treatment in the home country, therefore I'm not paying. So really be aware of there are some tricks, and that's your job, by the way, to help you there.
Okay, thank you, Fred and Laurent. Another question. So a series of questions that are pretty close once again. So the first one, in view of the result of this survey, It is clear that international mobility policies need to evolve. How does MSH work with its corporate clients to ensure this evolution? And another question that is very close, how does MSH adapt to these new forms of international mobility?
Well, I'm going to try to answer, Fabrice. Well, it is true that we are collectively at a turning point in our job of supporting global mobility policies. The pandemic crisis has moved the lines on new forms of mobilities and to new uses in the world of work, such as telecommuting, such as flex office. We talked on the subject of mental health problems at work also. So in this changing panorama, we must show humility and try to collaborate together, service providers such as MSH and corporate clients like you that joined the event. In fact, that's why we have, and Fred talk about this, to work with our association Preventer, because this type of association of clients, customers, companies allow us to exchange and to work with our customers to the future of internal mobility. As a consequence, in the next weeks and months, we are going to organize working groups with some of you members Preventer in order to reflect on the evolution of our offers, of our contracts, of the global mobility policies of our customers, and work together to make the improvement that we need to do vis-à-vis this new context.
Thank you, Laurent. Fred, do we have time to take a last question before the conclusion?
Sure.
Sure,
I'll make it short.
Okay. So what are the biggest pitfalls to implementing a short-term mobility program with regards to health coverage?
Well, there is the design of the program itself, where some environment. So if you decide to have a program where you want to allow some of your staff to go overseas to work remotely, we've seen clients making it like you can work for a year or two. We've seen clients making it you can work for 2 weeks. So you need to decide about how you want to scope it. How, if it goes via the manager, so you have to have the first rank of manager saying, yes, I agree for this person, I disagree for that person, because it could be job based. So you really, and we can help there because we see more and more clients doing that, help design it and frame it. And then you have to look country by country, and that is quite a tedious work, but we start to gain information here at MSH, and so we can really help with the country sheets. As I said, you have countries, and like US is one of them, that are not so friendly if you send someone to work overseas and work remotely. I'm not saying you are sending someone to a factory or an office in New York or somewhere. You're just having an employee asking to work from New York, but with the colleagues being in Paris or elsewhere. And so you need to know which territories are friendly and which are not, or more bureaucratic, put it that way. And my advice, and we see more companies doing that, they prefer to start a bit smaller with less territories, because employees are already very happy to see this social innovation. And then as they learn and as they see it, they expand. So that would be really my recommendation. Usually companies also, as I mentioned, will ask for that to be in a place where they have a subsidiaries, and some are even putting some time zone. like if you're Paris-based, you can go in a country with plus or minus 2 hours time difference. So they want to avoid, someone going to Hawaii where you have 12 hours time difference, and there will be no possibility almost to work with the person unless he keeps his body clock to the French time. So we can help design, and as Laurent said, we are moving quickly, but at the same time cautiously. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes, many thanks for this. So maybe we can now jump to the conclusion because we have still 5 minutes to go together.
Okay, well, thank you all again for attending. It was really a pleasure to deliver this result. I hope that you enjoyed the webinar. As I mentioned, when we started the webinar the survey with Fabrice, and we did the questionnaire, and we worked with OpinionWay, we were wondering what we will see. The environment was a bit doom and gloom, if you allow me that expression. We are in a quadruple crisis. We have the pandemic, and we haven't spoken much because we haven't heard much of the pandemic in the service, but we have the pandemic. I think we're talking about the 8 waves for the French people here. We have the war. I mean, who could have thought that a year ago we would have a war on European soil, and one that might be lasting and go even through the winter time? We have the war, we have the economic uncertainties, I mentioned it, inflation, rising interest rate, etc., and the environmental challenge. So it's quite a crisis plus the HR. So we were thinking, I don't know what we will be seeing, but the environment is harsh. Well, despite all this, the companies that answered the survey shared with us that they are growing, and that we are at a turning point for international mobility, with now, companies going for an increase in internationally mobile employees. So that's excellent news. When we ask them on the challenges that they are confronting with, the first 2 challenges, as I mentioned, are really HR related. Is the war of talents, or do I keep my talent, or do I attract and acquire new talent? And how do I adjust to new forms of mobility that are arising post-COVID? This challenging, they're painting, as I mentioned, 40% of the companies that we interviewed, half of them saying it's already behind me. And so that's my point of, we have companies that are resilient now these days. Last but not least, and that was the last point of the presentation, allowing employees to work from abroad as an answer to their request, so them asking you to do that, is an increasing point of attention for many companies, those we interviewed, but beyond that, those we're working with. And if, as of today, it's mostly a case-by-case decision, so, one by one, more and more companies are considering to frame it. And my entire point here is HR global mobility heads, HR global mobility teams, you need to stay at the center of this. You have to, help your company design, but you have to make sure it's secured from an HR angle. I'm talking, health and disability or accident insurance, local contract. And of course, your tax people also have to be looking at the tax from a corporation point of view. And of course, as we mentioned, MSH is there to help you and to grow that form of mobility in addition to the international mobility form that we've seen in the past. So thank you all for attending. It was really a pleasure to be there. Thank you, Meriadex. Thank you, Laurent. Thank you, Fabrice. And as Fabrice said, please answer the survey and feel free to review the webinar if you have missed part of it. It's been recorded. Think of a message. Thank you.